What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Breathe and Air podcast, where everyday action meets extraordinary mindset. I'm excited for today's guest, Mr. Alex Fienberg. He is a man of many experiences, and he's into fitness and cooking and has done a lot of things in his life and can lend a lot of wisdom. So I'm excited to have him here today. Alex, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I think this is going to be a blast.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun with it today. We were diving in early just now. Talking about all the broad experiences that you've had in life. So give the audience a little bit about you, like what you're about, what you do.
Yeah. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area before that area became insane. It was actually quite sane when I was growing up there. Yeah. I grew up to upper middle class parents, professionals, but not rich. And, they're very much, working minded individuals, but I always wanted more out of life. Even when I was a young kid, and I didn't realize that money could be made as a hedge fund manager. I didn't know what a hedge fund manager was when I was in high school or middle school, or what an investment banker was, or what entrepreneurs did. I kind of figured that if I wanted an extraordinary life, it was going to come through athletics. And I was reasonably gifted at baseball, though not incredibly gifted. And I had in my mind from about the age of 14 on that if I just worked really hard at baseball and I never let anybody outwork me, that that was going to open some doors and I could become a Major League Baseball player. And so, that didn't always map to reality. I was undersized and slow in high school, but I worked very hard. Ultimately got recruited by Stanford, Vanderbilt University, decided to go to Vanderbilt University because I thought playing in the SEC, moving to the South for 4 years would be an interesting change of pace, which it certainly was. Yeah. And I liked the vibe on the team and, my official visit. And so graduated high school in 2004, moved out to Nashville, Tennessee, August 2004, and began building the Commodore program that, you see now, which is, going to the College World Series most years. Now, we weren't that good when I was there, but, we had a lot of components that helped build the program from there. At Vanderbilt, I was an economics major, but I always tell people that I soft majored in psychology because just seeing a highly competitive team operate in a group dynamic really illuminated in my mind why some of these psychology experiments that we would read about in school or see in the news if we're paying attention to Australia these days, why they happen, right? Because when you put people in a pressure cooker, they're going to make decisions, say things, do things that are not logical, but the illogical actions actually have a pattern to them. So, I kept this in mind each year in school and built lessons upon lessons from just seeing kind of illogical things happen over and over again. And when I got done, I got drafted to play professional baseball in the Rockies organization, played there for a couple of years before I realized that dream was not going to become a reality. Connected with a hedge fund manager who was a conspiracy theorist, flew me around on a private jet when I was 23, 24 years old, explained to me a lot of the corruption in the world, explained to me central banking, explained to me, fascism, as he put it back in 2010, and, showed me a side of the world that I'd never seen before. So I moved out to work for him in Hong Kong in early 2010, stayed there for a little over a year, where I became, deeply immersed in, both normal corporate finance, but also conspiracy theories, because that's what colored a lot of his investment decisions. The largest one that I believed in at the time, and I still believe, is the nature of the Federal Reserve. It's not really a conspiracy theory. You can look it up and read the congressional passing of it that confirms that it is a private corporation with shareholders, and you can surmise, whose interests they are serving. But I took this lesson to believe that Silicon Valley was going to do really well back in 2010, because given the fact that the Fed is a private company that's owned by major Wall Street investment banks, and the major Wall Street investment banks are still underwater, we're still underwater from the gambles that they took on fraudulent mortgages back in 2007, 2008. We thought interest rates were going to stay low for a long period of time. We thought the tech sector was going to be the sector that benefited the most from that due to their sensitivity and cost of capital. And so I moved back to Silicon Valley in 2011, where I grew up. Elevator pitched my way into a job at Google against the recommendation of my dad and other people who thought I was insane at the time for turning other job offers down. But I had it in my mind I was going to get that one if I just got an invitation in, which I did. Worked at Google for 6 years, did sales, corporate strategy, product partnerships. Ultimately, working on the Google search product, Google Assistant product, partnering with ESPN, New York Times, Washington Posts of the world, MTV. And then in 2017, when the crypto market started taking off, I started to explore that space a little bit more, even though I'd been in Coinbase's headquarters in 2013, but I never took any investment steps in crypto early on, simply because I thought the government was going to make it illegal. Well, I got in the game in 2017. I joined a crypto exchange in 2018 to help them build out their US operations. And in the 3 years that I was working in crypto, it also became apparent to me that I needed to build my Twitter following if I wanted to have a career in the crypto space. So the channel or the path that I took to build out my crypto following was actually not focused on crypto, it was focused on fitness, because in the many years that I had spent working, one of the shortcuts, one of the psychological shortcuts that I realized when I was a competitive athlete is simply being in shape adds to your credibility. People believe what you say more, especially if you believe a lot of crazy things like I do. It's very important that I can speak in a professional manner, that I can look physically healthy, because otherwise people would just think I'm a maniac. And so, it's much easier to say crazy things if you're like stronger, leaner, have better diction, greater vocabulary than the person that you're speaking with. And I took all these things into account. So I trained very hard for the many, many years that I was working in Silicon Valley, and never dieted, because I'm not about that. But I realized after doing that for several years that I had found a system that was so much easier than what most people do for training, because I never dieted. I was never eating like chicken salads. I was, if you guys see the food that I post on Twitter or Instagram, it's like gourmet level, delicious food every meal of every day, eaten to the portion sizes that I desire. I created a completely intuitive diet where I don't really weigh or measure anything. I just eat within certain parameters, including only eating delicious food. I will not eat non-delicious food. And I listen to my body, so I was able to cut down my cardio, make my lifting more enjoyable, always love my meals, and, have abs that, I don't know how the lighting is here, but you can see.
There you go.
Just like a resting six pack year round without cutting. Like I don't cut, I just eat delicious food all the time and like train hard. And so that's what ended up getting my following on Twitter going. And, over the last 24 months, started releasing different digital products around my diet, my training plan, my recipes. And while working in crypto, I'd gotten my online business to a 5-figure monthly run rate. So I figured, I've always wanted to work for myself. I don't want to have a boss. No. So now I don't have a boss, and I teach people how to take the shortcuts that I found and shitpost, because that's fun too.
Man, I love it. So I love how the tactical approach of this is for my crypto space, but I'm going to use, being in shape, being able to, use proper diction, vocabulary, be able to grab people's attention, marketing strategies, these types of things. But in the background is this crypto side of things. Yeah. What I really think is interesting there, though, I know it was a lot to digest, but from California to Nashville, which, by the way, I'm in Nashville right now.
Nice.
Pretty cool. But from California to Nashville, what kind of culture shock was that, going from West Coast to the South? Like, what was that like?
It's a very good question. And so I grew up in the East Bay, which is not as crazy as San Francisco, not now and not then. And so we were not like libtards in the East Bay. We just leaned left.
Yep.
Like we did not like wars. We're more open to gun control. We're, I don't know what support unions, stuff like that, support minimum wage laws. Not, a lot of the crazy stuff that's commonplace now, but this was 20 years ago. When I grew up in California shot down the gay marriage proposition, Prop 8, in 2003, I believe. So my senior year of college, they voted down gay marriage. When I was in elementary school, they voted to make it illegal for illegal immigrants to access public services. And so this is very different from the California that elected Gavin Newsom most recently. But still, there was obviously a culture change going from California to Nashville, because I didn't, my mom's Catholic, but I grew up going to church once a year, Christmas or something like that. So by the time I was 18 years old going to college, I'd probably been to church about 18 times in my life. Maybe 2 times some years, 0 times other years, but on average about 1 time a year.
Right.
And, it was the first time that I encountered people using biblical verses as academic arguments. It's like, well, this has to be true because this is what the Bible says. I'm like, wait, what? Who made that rule? Like, you can't do that. How are people letting you get it? You can't say that. That doesn't make sense. And, my teammates would make fun of me for believing in evolution. Oh, Fienberg thinks we come from monkeys. Like, no, I don't. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think we evolved from other things that were not humans. And so, my first couple of years, it was frustrating. And, I was just like, these people are, I like them, but they're a little bit backwards. And it wasn't until maybe being around it for 3 years, 4 years, where I started to see a rationality behind it. And I've done more tweeting on this over the past several months because it's become more present in my mind now as I get older and as I become more conservative in my views. Sort of the role of religion versus science, and which truths each camp can perform better to, and really, seeing a lot of the people that I played baseball with in school who, would not get an A on a science test, but at the same time have happy families with good marriages and healthy children. It's like, well, they're doing something very right. Yep. Even if the logic that's underpinning it might be unscientific, the outcome is admirable, and that almost justifies any sort of illogical beliefs that lead to it, if we can even categorize those beliefs as illogical, because there's an operating value to believing certain things, even if they're not true, if they can lead you to achieving superior results. And this is one of the things that I realized as a baseball player, that rationality has its limitations. And if I want to be the best baseball player I can be, I need to believe things that aren't true. And I think as humans in a society, if we want to operate as efficiently and as peacefully and as kindly as we possibly can, I do think religion is an integral part of society now. I wouldn't have said this 12 years ago, 14 years ago, but now that I've seen what I've seen, you can't ever take religion out of society. If you take organized religion out of society, luxury brands are going to fill the gap. They're going to form cults, around Gucci, Louis Vuitton, or political parties are also going to fill the gap. Political ideologies are going to fill the gap left by secular beliefs. And so I think Nietzsche was the one who said that God is dead, and predicted that hundreds of millions of people would die in the 20th century, due in part to a rise in secularism. But seeing what I've seen now, it makes it more obvious how smart he was when he said what he said, because we're seeing it play out in real time. And had I not spent time both in Nashville, meaningful time both in Nashville and in California, I wouldn't be able to hold these two contradictory belief systems in my mind simultaneously. And I think a lot of the people that I lived with and around in California think that people in the South are stupid because they never lived in the South, and they don't understand the benefits of people not believing things that their logical system says are certain.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, I think we see that a lot in today's society. Is people are so set in what they know that they don't realize that their reality is quite different from the rest of the world, right? You get so locked into what your perceived reality is. We can go down the road of believing everything you see on the media and what's fed you and what's pushed you subconsciously all the time, versus the people that you surround yourself with and the place that you live. I mean, all of these are factors, but the truth of the matter is everybody is living such a different reality. I mean, it is all very individualized. So I think traveling like that, I thankfully got the ability to travel a lot when I was young, and got to go overseas and see things that I'm very grateful for. But I think that's, part of why I think the way that I do. So do you think that not getting out of one certain place can really alter someone's perception of reality?
Well, it doesn't alter it. It keeps it stagnant.
Mm.
And, the main reason why I, can find the shortcuts that I can find, thread certain needles that other people can't thread, connect dots that other people can't connect, is because of the breadth of experience that I've had in life. Because as an athlete, I was like always kind of the nerdy kid on my sports teams, where it's, if I ask Fienberg to do it, I have teammates who've made millions of dollars as Major League Baseball players, but their families want them to graduate from school because it's like meaningful for them. I'll have these guys, like, now, I'm not talking about when we were in school, but 10 years, 12 years, 15 years out of school. I guess we're not 15 years out of school, but 10 years or 12 years out of school, will ask me for help on their homework, right? That's the guy that I was on my elite teams. But if I'm around academically oriented people, I'm the only athlete in that group. And so with every group that I've ever been a part of, I've always been on the periphery, because there was always something else that I was interested in that wasn't like fully aligned with what the group was interested in. And so that forced me to kind of see commonalities in the human condition that all groups share. Not just, it's not like, well, I see the world through sports. That's one lens that I can see the world through, but I can also see the lens through academics. And I can see how those two lenses contradict each other. And I can see that there's different scenarios where one framework makes more sense than the other framework. And there's other frameworks where that's the reverse is true. And I've seen a lot of different, societal organizing mechanisms from traveling and also from working abroad. And so the more I've seen, the more obvious it is to me that it's a necessity to question what you're being presented with, particularly if you've never been able to move or get out of there. Like, you will never be able to fully develop your mind if you grow up, go to school, work in the same place without ever traveling, working, living anywhere else.
That's important. I had the pleasure of playing college athletics as well. And I really resonate with what you said about a locker room and seeing. I always say, I wish the world would see, what we do as a United States, or whatever you want to call it, right? As a locker room, right? People from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, beliefs, it doesn't matter, right? Everybody's coming together for one common goal. When you cross the line, when you get on the diamond, when you get on the field, everybody is band of brothers and nothing else matters. I think there's a lot to be said about that, not only in, unity, but also in realizing that a lot of that shit doesn't matter, and that, we have a lot more in common than is made to believe through media and through all this separation and fear and everything else that's being pushed today.
Yeah. And I would add to that, if you spend any meaningful time in a locker room, your teammates are going to try to fuck with you. And you're going to try to fuck with your teammates, right? Because it's like, it's fun. It keeps everybody paying attention and excited.
Yeah.
And, when I started working at Google and became more familiar with corporate America, I entered the corporate world with the expectation that people would try to play mind games with me, because that's how sports works. Sports is a very, very mental thing. And if you can get in your opponent's head, you have the advantage. If your coach can get in your head or the heads of the players on his team, in his mind, he's going to be a better coach. So, a lot of how I saw advantage being gained in the world was through that sports prism. And so when I started seeing a lot of the manipulative actions in corporate America, I interpreted it for what it was. Oh yeah, they're just trying to take advantage of us. And I could say it with a straight face without my blood pressure rising, because it was just obvious to me. It's like that,
right.
Like, what do you think is happening? That's obviously what's happening. What they're saying isn't true. And they're saying it in this particular way to elicit this emotional response so they can get that, like, obviously. But seeing the same things would actually be very emotionally traumatizing to a lot of my colleagues, because, they go to Ivy League schools. They're not familiar with locker room environments. They expect people to be honest with them. And so when they're in an environment that is, heavy in psychological manipulation, they kind of break down. They don't know. No, it's just fake. Don't worry about it. It's all like, you're going to get paid, and like everything else is a lie. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really like that twist of what you do, because you have the fitness sector and the food that you do so well, and you help so many people with it. But then on the other side, I saw you had the cheat code to surviving corporate America just recently, right? So
yeah,
it's all practical things, but give a little teaser about what people could expect to find within that.
yeah. So, it starts, as I mentioned, in school, where I went to an elite university and I had a real academic major. I was an economics major. So we would see bankers come in and talk to us, wealth managers, investment advisors, all that. And I was always paying attention to the subconscious. I was, since the age of 2021, I was always paying attention to what made me feel a certain way that was not logical. And when I saw that people who, wore suits well, who spoke confidently, when I saw these people give presentations, and I said to myself, I'll believe anything these people say just because of how they're presenting it, then I realized, like, if I'm not incorporating these things in my life, I'm just fighting an uphill battle. And I don't want to fight an uphill battle. I would prefer to fight every battle as a downhill battle that I possibly can. And so, with my cheat codes for surviving corporate America, I do touch on the fact that, being in shape, being good looking, particularly in non-technical roles. Because if you're an engineer and you're like, you look like George Clooney, but you can't write code, like you're gonna have limited value there. But in people-facing roles and roles where there is subjectivity to the assessment of your performance, people are gonna rely on subconscious fillers to fill the gaps for them. And so if you're good looking, if you're in shape, if you're responsible, you're always going to get the benefit of the doubt in a corporate situation. So I cover that. I cover some of the lies that companies tell you to exploit you, and what the best way is to get around those. I'm also working on a salary negotiation guide right now. I touch on salary in the cheat codes for surviving corporate America, but the salary negotiation guide should come out late October. And because with all of the patterns and all the dots that I've connected, I've realized that there's so many people. A lot of my followers are smart people, smart guys in their 20s making $110,000, $120,000, $140,000. But if they just negotiated a couple things in a certain way, presented them a certain way, spoke in a certain tone, made sure the timing was aligned with other processes, there's no reason why they couldn't get $25,000 more to do the exact same job. Oh. And that's what sports taught me, I think, probably at first, is a baseball. If I'm hitting against David Price in a scrimmage, and David Price went on to have a $31 million annual contract, like, if I can hit the baseball that he throws, I can hit the baseball that he throws. It doesn't matter how much money he's getting paid to throw it. And so realizing that companies will kind of create artificial distinctions between different employees. Oh, you're a junior level X, so you make 78,000. But once you get to the senior level, you make 95,000. And then you become an associate. It's like, nobody can tell. Let's be real. Yeah. It's all the same. And so, if you're a smart person in the lower band, and you can speak well, speak confidently, even if you can't get that promotion at your own company, you should be able to cross negotiate, get a job offer from a competitor, and just get paid that higher salary band. They're like, people, they get, the longer you spend working a mid-paying or low-paying career, the more your mind becomes closed to the possibility that you can do exactly the same work for 30% more money if you just figure out how to ask for it in a convincing way. And there's very, very simple shortcuts to be able to ask for it in a convincing way. You're speaking with empathy. Are you speaking slowly? Are you in better shape than the person that you're talking to? Right? If you didn't get a job offer, have you tried interviewing for that job, but being in amazing shape? Because the response that you're going to get from the people that you're interviewing with is different. So yeah, you can slave away and try to climb that corporate ladder for 5-6 years to get that pay raise, or you could just get in really good shape in 18 months and then just skip it and then just go grab it and get somebody to trust you and give you that offer. Yeah. If you want to take the long road, go for it. But I'm not about that.
Right. I'll piggyback off that too. Not to mention, are you going to be perceived as, better in that situation, but also you're going to think better. You're going to feel better. You're going to be able to do, like, your brain is going to actually work better. You know, there's a real link between, you know, BMI and muscle and the way that your brain works, and the brain body connection is a very real thing. So yeah, I mean, truer things haven't been said.
Well, and I think that's true. I think the biggest difference is the confidence that it brings you, because people will gravitate towards confident people. People will prefer to spend time towards optimistic people. So if you find that you're always in a bad mood, you know, you should probably consider, you know, exercising more so that you can be in a better mood, so that people will spend more time around you.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing a challenge right now, the Chef Alex challenge. What is it all about? I saw octopus pizza and I was enamored.
Yeah, definitely. And let me know if the noise in the background, if you can hear the noise in the background.
Yeah, you're good.
My housemate, Mike Medici, is doing some personal improvement stuff, and I can go tell him to turn it down if we need to. But the Chef Alex challenge is, you know, I started it last week because 2 weeks ago, well, let me rewind, and I can talk through, you know, what some of the challenges that I've had, which I'm very transparent about, because I want people to know all the shortcuts that I have, but also, you know, some of the shortcomings that are aligned with these shortcuts. And so, you know, because of the way that I train at a very high intensity. I also have a shoulder injury lingering from when I was 20 years old in college. So my left shoulder is quite immobile, to the point where I don't do bench press anymore, which really saddens me, because, you know, like a couple months before I stopped bench pressing, I was doing incline press with like 105s. And then, you know, the physical therapist just was like, no, you shouldn't really not be doing that. Fine, I trust you. And so I've had to modify my workouts a little bit to accommodate for my shoulder. But more recently, in the last 6 to 12 months, I started noticing like symptoms of spinal misalignment. And so, you know, what that meant was, you know, little weakness in these fingers, little tingling sensation, little itching sensation. And I realized with, you know, how fast my shoulders started feeling no bueno, I can't let that happen to my spine, because my spine's about 5 times more important than my shoulder. I mean, you chop my shoulder off, I'll figure out how to get by. But if I have spinal misalignment issues, that's going to be a big problem. And so I reoriented my workouts to do more unilateral training. So I would stop placing asymmetric load on my spine. So, you know, I'm not tugging with greater force on one side than the other that's causing, you know, spinal rotation. But, you know, in the last few weeks, I got a little bit lazy with my cooking. I was still cooking most of my food, as I've done for years, but I was probably getting, you know, 5-6 restaurant meals a week.
Yeah.
And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, my body was just like aching, like way more than I would have expected based on how I was training. And so I thought to myself, dude, you know how to cook food. Like, you sell cooking products. You should just only cook. Like, it's not hard. It's not hard for you. You should just do that.
Yeah.
And so last week I committed to only cooking my own food, and my body just felt great. Like within 3, 4, 5 days, like all the inflammation, all the aching is gone. And so I thought, you know what? Everybody should know about this. I'm going to do a Chef Alex challenge. Let's see if we can cook all our meals at home for 1 week, and, you know, put them on Twitter, put them on Instagram, tag me, add the hashtag Chef Alex challenge. And, you know, the winner's going to get access to my masterclass, but everybody's going to feel better from participating.
Yeah. That was one of my goals whenever I took this new job out in Nashville. I was like, I want to be able in my new job to cook all my meals. Like, I always was on the run and, you know, getting lunch out. So I would always cook breakfast, always cook dinner, but I would always get lunch out. And so I was like, you know what, man, I just want to be able to cook all my meals. Like, that's the goal. That's one of the goals for this next job. But yeah, it's such a difference. It really is. I mean, it helps fuel your lifestyle in a much better way than when you eat junk. And it's crazy. I mean, seeing all the stuff with, you know, all the vegetable oil, canola oils, and all the stuff that's, you know, margarine, and how they cook the food. And it's a mess. When you really get into it, you're like, damn, I'd not want to eat that stuff.
Well, not just that, like, a lot of people don't realize, they don't think about the commercial incentives behind food. But, you know, I'm worked in business. I was worked in finance, financial analyst, all that stuff. So I think about the business, the business stuff behind it. And what you realize is carbohydrates, and specifically processed carbohydrates, are the most profitable item to sell, simply because they're shelf stable. You want to go buy some Cheez-Its or something. Those Cheez-Its from a month ago are the same Cheez-Its that are on the shelf right now. They don't go bad that quickly.
Yeah.
And so, and they're all made from refined carbohydrates. So it's like very low cost input, long window that the company has to sell it. Obviously that's going to result in higher profit margins. So the corporate food is going to want to steer you towards eating their processed carbohydrate offerings, because those offerings make them the most money. Now, people don't realize that when they're buying their food, you really want protein. Protein is what fills you up. Protein is what's going to help you build lean muscle mass, which is ultimately going to power your metabolism. But if you're only relying on restaurant food and you're just eating the stuff that they give you, those meals are not constructed for your health. They're constructed for the profitability of the vendor. And so once you realize that, they're protein deficient, and they're probably giving you too many carbs. At the very least, if you're relying on restaurants, you should just get double meat and leave half the carbs that they give you on the plate, because just because you paid for them doesn't mean they're good for you. Yeah. Which is actually one of the cheat codes in my first book, 10 Easy Wins for Easier Fat Loss, is like, you should waste more food. Like, it's totally okay for an American to waste food, because there's a lot more Americans with diabetes than are starving. And the likelihood of you as an American to starve to death is quite low. The likelihood of you as an American to become obese or diabetic is quite high. So, weight your risks accordingly.
Wow. Yeah. I haven't heard it put that way, but that's very true. I saw something that you said, that most people overeat, but are malnourished.
Yes.
And that really stuck out to me, because it's like, yeah, you're eating a lot of food, but you're not getting proper nutrients. And that's kind of what you just touched on there with the way that things are marketed and profit margin. I mean, it is a money game at the end of the day when it comes to big food like that.
Yeah. And a lot of people have no idea that, when I talk to people about eating intuitively, they're like, how do I know when I'm hungry? It's like, dude, you know what it feels like to be hungry.
You're hungry.
You've been hungry before, right? Well, that's what hunger feels like, is when you're hungry. But people are so conditioned to eat like animals, to eat like, they're on a clock. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. I need to eat breakfast. It's 12 o'clock. I need to eat lunch. It's 6 o'clock. I need to eat dinner. It's like, why? Does your body know that it's noon? Does your body know that it's 6? How do you know that 3 meals is ideal? Maybe you should be eating 2. Maybe you should be eating 5. Maybe you should vary on a given day. And so we've become so disconnected from a lot of the, everybody's born with a natural compass that can either become refined or weighed down from atrophy and non-use. And people know what hunger feels like. It's just, if you spend a couple decades ignoring your hunger signals, simply eating because it's mealtime, eating portion sizes that have been dictated to you, not determined by you in accordance with your hunger levels, you're going to find that your caloric consumption is very strongly mismatched with your caloric needs. But if you spend time focusing in on how hungry do I feel? What do I feel hungry for? What foods distort my hunger? What, how does hydration, how does sleep, how does stress affect my hunger? Most people who can get those things under control, they can have as much or more success on an intuitive diet where you're not counting calories, you're not weighing and measuring your food. You're simply eating good tasting stuff in accordance with how you feel.
I love that. I think you and I are very much on the same page, because I get asked often, like, hey man, I've been, trying to eat better and I've been cutting carbs. And I'm like, wait, rewind this. Like, what kind of carbs are you eating in the first place? Like, carbs are not an enemy. Sugar can even be good for you at certain times. Like, it's just depending. Are you training? What's your output? Like,
right.
Are you eating white bread or are you eating like good start? Like, are you eating good? Are you eating sourdough? Are you eating jasmine white rice? Like, what kind of stuff are you actually putting in your body? So I think there is a misconception, and, all these fads and diets and things that once again sell, when in reality, it doesn't have to be that complex. You don't have to eat chicken and rice and broccoli for every meal. Like, it's been.
Oh yeah. I mean, bodybuilders probably ruin dieting for millions of people who think that, I need to eat like that to look like that. Like, no, you don't. I don't eat like that. I mean, I don't look like a bodybuilder. I don't want to. Most people don't want to look like bodybuilders. But, I think with carbs, the more I think about what makes something commercially viable versus what's actually useful for people, I understand why carb restrictive plans are commercially viable. It's because most people do eat too many carbs.
Yeah.
Carbs amplify your hunger. And so, one of the reasons why, if I'm getting fluffier than I think I should be, I will limit my carbs. I'm not going to cut them out completely, but I'm going to eat less, right? I'm going to try to get more protein relative to my carbs. And that doesn't mean I'm weighing and measuring everything, but I know that animals have protein and fat and breads and grains don't, and they mainly have carbs. So I just reweight my consumption towards things that have heartbeats, and it tends to work out. And so what people don't realize with a lot of things, you've seen the bell curve meme where the dumb guy and the smart guy do the same thing, and the guy in the middle just gives a bunch of reasons why he doesn't. You could say the same thing with carbs. Carbs are like debt, in the sense that your basic financial planner will tell you to have less debt because you have to service the debt. You have to put collateral up to get a loan. You have to do a lot of things. And so that doesn't mean that you shouldn't own debt or have debt at all. Like some of the richest people in the world have a lot of debt, but it does mean that your debt needs to go towards something productive, because if you're borrowing money and you're investing it in something that's going to go down in value, like a Ferrari or something like that. Yeah. Ferraris might not go down in value, but like a, most luxury goods, you buy a Gucci handbag or something like that, probably going to go down in value. So if you're borrowing money to buy things that go down in value, that's a great way to increase the rapidity of your wealth depletion. But if you're borrowing money to buy things that go up in value, particularly things that go up in value at a higher rate than the interest rate you're paying, then that's actually like a cheat code to multiplying your wealth. And carbs are the same way. Carbs, if you don't train, you really don't need them if you're not doing anything intense. But if you are training intensely, carbs make it a lot easier. And it's the intensity of your training that seems to matter most in terms of making aesthetic gains. Like, this is what exercise science gets so wrong, in my view, is that, they're so concerned with calorie tracking, macro tracking, caloric deficit, caloric surplus. It's like, have you ever just tried to be an athlete and like train hard and run faster and lift heavier and rest if you don't think that you can do that, and eat sufficiently so that you can train in that style? Because that's what I do. And it's a lot easier than doing it the more standard ways that you'll see most trainers advocate for.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to be said there. I mean, it is weird how the fitness industry and how food in general has become something that is popular, right? I think we've seen the rise in healthy, quote unquote, healthy foods, right? If something's marketed as something that's healthy, if a diet, if a trainer is saying that this is the way that it is, then I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. People that don't do the research on their own, are going to believe what they're being said. If something's marketed as all natural, well, do you know what the guidelines are for something to actually be named all natural? And then you look at the back and there's 50 ingredients on it, It's
yeah. And the older I get, the more I think the human mind mimics the human body. Like truly, in the sense that, what you said, you think, well, people are just dumb. Why can't they see what's obvious? But the reality is most people's worldview is not just a little bit off. It's like very, very far off, but it's still better than having no worldview for them. And so what happens, I actually wrote a book called Dummies for Smarties, which is explaining how dumb people think, because I had to learn how dumb people thought, and why, from a young age, I would have a lot of frustrating conversations. But it's because, a dumb person's cognition is sort of like a rotten house, in the sense that, okay, you have a rotten house. That rotten house has a lot of rotten beams that are supporting its weight. Each of those rotten beams will challenge the structural integrity of the house, but that doesn't mean you just start ripping them out. You need to be very careful in how which ones are supporting weight, how you can redistribute the weight when you're removing them and then replace them with more sturdy ones. And that's how the human mind works. Because if you believe 50 things that are wrong and 30 things that are right, you can't just rip out 2 of the wrong things and say, okay, we'll just keep these other 30 things the same. It'll cause a lot of, confusion in the person. And so, one of the reasons why people's minds gravitate towards overly simplistic descriptions of what's going to happen is because an overly descriptive or overly simplistic description is not going to mess up all of the other rotten support structures that exist in their brain. It'll let them kind of exist as they are without challenging them. And, even though they're not going to get a lot better, they're probably not going to get a lot worse either. They're not going to have a mental breakdown when they start questioning everything. So you just keep it simple, and like, maybe it'll help some people and maybe it won't. It's not true, but it could still be helpful even if it's not true, as we talked about with other things earlier.
Yeah, no, it makes plenty of sense. I'm thinking back, you went to Vanderbilt, to prestigious school, to really good education. What are things, and I mean, I'm thinking about what we're talking about in terms of how society has formed our thinking and not being aware of a lot of that programming that's happening. So what are some things when you're at Vanderbilt, when you're in college, things that you wish you would have learned in college that college does not teach?
I wish I would. So I was an economics major. I wish I would have learned that it wasn't true, because it took me several years after graduating to realize that it wasn't true. Like, I know by my junior year, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, it seems like the economics classes are just making excuses to give rich people all the money. Like, that was kind of like, this is kind of the pattern that I'm seeing. I didn't realize until a couple of years after school that that's exactly what the economics classes were for. And there's a reason why, because, you just look at who started the school. Cornelius Vanderbilt, robber baron, not exactly the nicest dude, who was like a compassionate, patriarch and philanthropist. I mean, he was like a pretty hard-nosed competitor. And you look at a lot of the people who funded other prestigious universities, Leland Stanford, John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, the people who formulated the modern educational system were robber barons. And I don't think that all of them just decided towards the end of their lives, life's been really good, I just want to help people. I think they were still trying to advance their own self-interests by training people to think in a certain way that would profit and benefit them. So I didn't realize that when I was in school. I wish I did. Probably took me about 6, 7, maybe even 8 years to realize that markets are not efficient, and you make money from inefficient markets. And information isn't perfect because there's no such thing as knowing everything. So it's a question of how you're going to place different value on different components. And, there's just a lot of variables that come into play that, they're not accounted for in economics classes. So I wish I knew that. Probably also wish I took steroids and human growth hormones when I was younger, but that's a different topic. And,
hitting some bombs.
Yeah. I mean, if I could make $40 million playing baseball, not work a desk job or something, you got to figure the cost benefit or the health benefit of working a desk job would, probably cancels out whatever risks I would have been taking if I had been injecting those foreign substances in my body at the time.
That's funny, man. That's funny. I think about, we have a lot of similar, experiences, but I think about economics and, inflation and your whole view of, starting what you have now was because of realizing the crypto side of things as well. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into that.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of people are interested now. It's to the point where, it's not 2016, 2015, even like where, people heard about it, but there was not a lot of buy-in. You're having large corporations like owning crypto now, and it's become something that is on a lot more people's radars. So
sure,
I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that, maybe just decentralized finance in general. The difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and the difference between, an actual asset versus, something like Ethereum that's, has a use case. So explain that a little bit. How'd you get into crypto? What were some of the first things that you started digging into?
Sure. So I got into crypto for the same reason I got into Silicon Valley, is because I got to Silicon Valley because I thought the Fed was going to keep interest rates low for a long period of time. So maybe I can explain the implications of low interest rates. And apologies for that dinging. I'll turn my phone off.
You're good.
Keeps coming. But actually, I think I can just turn the sound off.
Yeah, you're good.
It'll be fine. So when with low interest rates, what low interest rates as a consumer means, you can borrow money more cheaply. Your credit card interest rate's lower, your mortgage is lower, all that. But that's great for you as an individual. But what does it do at a societal level? Well, if everybody has lower interest payments on their house, that means almost everybody can afford to pay a higher equity price for the house. So if instead of paying $1,000 in interest and $1,000 on your house principal, well, if interest rates go down and you only have to pay $500 of interest, it's not like the bids aren't going to get comparably more competitive to account for the fact that the interest financing is cheaper. Other people are going to end up bidding essentially a monthly payment of $1,400 in principal, and with that same $500 or maybe $600 in interest payments, which is going to result in a higher price of the asset. And so low interest rates result in higher asset prices. But assets are not only houses. Assets are not only stocks. Assets can include gold. They can include corn. They can include wheat. They can include cattle. Because when you make interest rates low, you make it easy for people to buy things on margin. You make it easy for financial speculators to try to make a couple bucks buying and selling assets that they believe are mispriced. And so what that's ultimately going to lead to is inflation. Now, it didn't really lead to a ton of meaningful inflation in the early 2010s. In some areas it did. Real estate prices in San Francisco got pretty crazy. People will say, oh, that was tech. Well, why did tech get big? Tech got big in a very large part because interest rates were low and VCs could raise a ton of money because their funding sources didn't really have a ton of viable options. They couldn't just stick their money in U.S. treasuries and get 4 or 5%. They needed to take more risk. So they started throwing more money to Sequoia, throwing more money to Andreessen Horowitz, who then invested money in startups. And then the founders of these startups and their employees, particularly the ones that did well, had more money to spend on local real estate. So it all worked, even though it wasn't directly related to low interest rates, it was very closely indirectly related to low interest rates. And you're seeing the cost of everything go up. And so the reason you're seeing the cost of everything go up is because banks, when they're in a financial bind, if you let interest rates rise, what that means is their assets, banking assets, are actually IOUs. So the assets that banks hold is the debt that other people owe them. And so when interest rates go up, if you owe me $1 million paid in 20 years and interest rates are at 1%, that $1 million that you owe me might be worth $900,000, $800,000 today, right? If I were to sell that IOU to somebody else. But if interest rates go up to like 10% and you owe me $1 million in 20 years, well, all of a sudden that IOU is only worth like $200,000 or $300,000. And so if I'm a bank and I need my assets to always exceed my liabilities, what I owe to other people, I need low interest rates so that the IOUs that I hold on my books maintain some degree of value. The broader implications of that is the costs of a lot of things that regular people buy are going to get much higher or much faster than their wages are going to go up. That's what inflation is. Now, some people say the inflation that we're seeing right now is transitory. It has to do with COVID, supply chain stuff. Well, yeah, I think some of it probably does. And some of it also has to do with the fact that the Fed printed $4 trillion last year. Yeah. And so what people are seeing now is, with the government just, creating financial policies and other policies with no historical precedent, they're seeing go out of control. And if you assess the Federal Reserve, I think I'm forgetting this guy's name, but he was the president of the World Bank, and he said that if like a Caribbean country, if a banana republic central bank was structured like the Federal Reserve, they would never loan them money because they would be certain that it would be a corrupt organizational structure that would just not use the money the way they wanted it to. And so I think it's becoming more obvious to more people that those in charge don't really have a handle on what's going on. They don't really have the country's best interest in mind. And what that's ultimately going to mean is the things that you've considered normal are going to get more expensive. So people are starting to throw more of their money into assets that they believe are going to hold value, stocks being one, houses being one, and crypto being another. Crypto being the newest one because it's more digitally accessible, works better for internet transactions than, say, sending a bank wire, which could take many days. And so that's a big reason why cryptocurrency has become more popular over the last several years, without getting into, some of the durability and the security of various blockchains. Is that good to kind of pause on? I can obviously talk for longer. But.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm interested. What was the first crypto coin that you invested in?
It would have either been Bitcoin or Ethereum. I forget. I think I probably bought both. And so what was interesting is in 2017, I was overweight on Ethereum. I bought, because I thought it had more to run. I saw all these ICOs coming out. So for those unfamiliar, an ICO is basically different groups would like release their own token, but it would be based on the Ethereum standard. It would be an ERC20 token, which is what you call the token format, sort of like JPEG, but for Ethereum. And so I thought, oh, well, that's going to create more demand for Ethereum. Bitcoin doesn't have anything similar going on with it. So I'm going to buy mostly Ethereum. So I bought mostly Ethereum in 2017. And I saw it go all the way down to like $98. My average buying price was probably $700. I saw it go down to like $98. Oh, shit. And I actually ended up selling most of my Ethereum in 2019 and 2020. When it went up to 350, I like sold a third of it. When it went up to 1,000, I was like, okay, I'll sell another third of it. And obviously, in retrospect, that was a bad decision. But I bought more Bitcoin in the process because I thought Bitcoin was going to do really well this year. And so, despite my retrospectively poor decision selling 2/3 of the Ethereum that I owned, I did quadruple my Bitcoin position last year. So it kind of like made up for that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I could definitely be doing much worse.
Yeah. I mean, let's see, guys. It's the, what day is it? I'm losing track. It's the 13th. So, I mean, we're in a good spot for Bitcoin right now. So I think you're okay. We're doing good. We're doing good. It's a crazy world, like I can't say that I'm so well-versed that I can speak of like the metaverse and all this stuff it just gets over my head at times. Like it's wild seeing NFTs and cryptocurrencies and this almost alternate reality that is beginning to unfold. And I think COVID and supply chain and all of those things involved have maybe catapulted it a little bit. Mm-hmm. But, I think it was inevitable. If you look back, not even, 10, 15 years ago, like 20 years ago, iPhones, we didn't even have an iPhone. Like mm-hmm. I remember plugging in a cassette to the car to plug in an aux cord to a big brick iPad or iPod that just had music on it. Right. And now we have these screens that are basically an extension of us, if you really want to think about it.
Yeah. And as the economy becomes more advanced, as wealth grows, at least in the hands of some, human existence is going to become more and more detached from physical reality. And so, digital space is nearly infinite. And, as more people become disenfranchised with normal life, or, frankly, they can find dopamine, higher, stronger sources of dopamine more accessibly in digital realms, that's where they're going to go. The water is going to go to the path of least resistance, and the human mind is going to seek dopamine in its path of least resistance. And if that path is a digital land, it's going to be a digital land, and people are going to literally live most of their lives in these digital lands. Not that they don't already. You see gamers who play video games 16 hours a day, right? Oh. Now, those might be seen as extreme cases, but there's probably millions of people in the multi-billion person global population whom that characteristic would apply to. And I think it's going to grow. I think it's very much going to be Matrix-like, where people are like literally spending all of their times in constructed realities, which you can make the argument in the real world it's a constructed reality too, but this is more obviously a constructed reality. Yeah. And it's going to be normalized.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. It really is. I think, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Or
It doesn't matter.
Just
It doesn't matter what
is
I
it
think.
just
It just
is?
is. Yeah, it just is.
It just
I mean,
is.
clearly there's bad things that come from it, because I think as people become more disconnected from reality, I think a lot of the crazy politics that we've seen over the last 5 years, it's all coming from cities, by the way.
Yeah.
Nobody who grows up on a farm, like making animals produce food, believes any of these crazy academic theories, because you grow up on a farm, you know that boy cattle are different than girl cattle.
Yeah.
Every time, right? You know that if you don't do work, you will not yield crops. You're very, very grounded in reality growing up on a farm, where when you live in a city, you just go buy food at the store. Food comes from a store. What do you mean it comes from a farm? Food comes from the store. And you get money by going to an office, not getting your hands dirty. So already cities are one step removed from reality, and like where the food comes from and where the goods are manufactured and how they're processed and distributed. They don't know anything about that. So they're already one level disconnected. Once you let these same people or their kids live in digital land, you're going to also have similarly bizarre theories coming from these people, particularly as they gain economic power and megaphones that are associated with the economic power, because their mechanism or process for wealth generation and hierarchy climbing isn't really dependent on them having a very strong pulse on reality. The ideas that they generate are actually going to be quite far out there. And there's nothing tethering them to reality that says, hey, dude, that's like totally not true.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. I like the concept that you explained with the city versus the country. It makes plenty of sense. It really does. I want to kind of shift gears here. There's a quote I saw you say that, it's okay to be selfish. I think a lot of times, people going through life, we have so many things pulling at us from all different directions. We think that we have to appease everybody or please the parents, or, what is this person going to think even, the fears of being authentic to yourself and doing what you believe is right. These things, right? The thought of selfish, the term selfish might have been coined as something negative, but it seems that it can be a positive thing. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. So you got to realize, like, a lot of propaganda is constructed to target regular people who have more normalized emotions. So the average person doesn't want to be selfish, because the average person's parents try to teach them and raise them to not be selfish. No. So a lot of times when people are telling you don't be selfish, what they don't actually mean don't be selfish. They mean acquiesce to my selfishness. Listen to what I'm saying. That's what they mean, right? So in that sense, if your choice is to acquiesce to the selfishness of an individual trying to control your behavior, or you to just control your own behavior, I think you're in a safer position to simply control your own behavior and not yield sovereignty to those decisions to a third party, right? That's why it's okay to be selfish. The other reason why it's probably okay to be selfish in a lot of situations that other people don't realize is, and this has to do with the life experience that I have, but the more you win, the more you can do like what you want. And so, one thing that I realized playing sports is it's a lot easier to win if you're doing it on your own terms. It's a lot harder to win when you're trying to perform according to other people's standards. And so if you realize that if you just win, you don't have to do all the other things that the losers have to do, then you realize, like, no. It's not about doing all this crap and not pissing people off. If you can win, it doesn't matter if you're pissing people off, because you're a winner, and that's your negotiating leverage. So you either need to win or you need to be nice, but you don't need both. And in fact, you're probably not going to have both. So just pick one. Pick the one of the two that makes you feel more comfortable or makes you feel more free, if that's what you're going for. And in my life, relative to others, I mean, I'm not a psychopath, but in my life, when I've chosen to win, when I've chosen to continue to add value, irrespective of what other people are telling me, that's always put me in a stronger negotiating position. It's always given me more freedom and always helped me manage anxiety.
Yep, that's huge. What's your definition of success?
Doing what you want most of the time. I think
Why most of the time?
Well, because nobody's going to do what they want all the time. It's not possible.
Yeah.
But spending most of your life doing things that you find enjoyable or rewarding, I think is success.
Amazing. Alex, tell everybody where they can find you on social and, some of the programs that you're offering, whether it's cheat codes or food.
Find me on Twitter, Instagram, but Twitter's, the main channel. Both handles are the same. Alex Fienberg 1, Feinberg 1. So Alex Fienberg 1. DM me if you have any questions, but, I offer ways to eat without counting calories. That's how I diet. Ways to train without hating training. Ways to cook. That's a lot easier than Martha Stewart. So those are my programs from last year. Cooking shows are a scam too. They just got to make people think it's more complicated than it is. It's not, I assure you. I also have cheat codes for surviving corporate America, which is about what we talked about earlier. Dummies for Smarties, helping to understand dumb people. And my salary negotiation guide that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks. It'll basically help people connect dots to get paid what they're probably worth now without realizing it. But message me on any of those platforms. My DMs are open, and they will be until I probably hit like 100,000 followers on both, which is not going to happen anytime soon.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think you've added a lot of value and insight. People are going to love this one. So it's been a pleasure, Alex.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Everybody, thank you for listening to another episode of the Breathe and Air podcast, where everyday action meets extraordinary mindset. That was Mr. Alex Fienberg. Go check him out, DM him, check out some of the programs. And if y'all like today's episode and you got something from it, share it with a friend. Share it with someone who you think can benefit from what was said today, and then put it into action. We all like to feel motivated, hear cool stuff, but if we're not actually doing it, it doesn't mean anything. So thank y'all so much for tuning in to another episode, and have a great rest of your week.